Hi, this is Dan from Bible Prophecy and Truth, and today I'm going to talk about the seven seals, which is another one of my favorite prophetic pictures that God painted for us. God kind of made a mosaic for us where He gave us all these pictures and painted them all for us, and when you put them all together, they fit together in this amazing, awesome mosaic that God gave us. And so understanding the seven seals goes right along with prophetic understanding of the last days, of the images that God gave us from Daniel 7, Daniel 2, Revelation 13, Revelation 17, and the seven trumpets, and everything all fits together. And when we put the seven seals together with those, it really helps. It puts that whole entire mosaic together and just paints this amazing, awesome picture. And the first four seals are different than the last three. Just like the seven trumpets, the last three trumpets are the three woes. They're separated from the last four, or from the first four, sorry, and kind of a different theme. And the first four seals are really different than the last three seals. And the first four seals are more specifically known as the Four Horsemen of Revelation. And these four horsemen depicted in Revelation are also the four spirits that are in the world, as we see in Zechariah. Now, Revelation 6, 1 through 8 and Zechariah 6, 1 through 8 both give us this picture of these four horsemen and four chariots in Zechariah. And it talks about all of when you put it together, it's basically the same prophecy, but you see two different pieces of it, and when you put them together, it just gives us an amazing picture that is, and you'll see what I'm talking about when I'm done here. So like Daniel and Revelation both talk about the same beasts, as I just mentioned, Revelation 6 and Zechariah 6 both deal with the same prophecy, the four horsemen or four spirits which are in the world. Now, the seven seals in Revelation are broken up, where Revelation 8:1 actually finishes the seven seals, and there's a lot of things, a lot of visions that John sees in between, but we're going to focus in the first part of this with just the four horsemen, which is Zechariah 6, 1 through 8. Now, I encourage you to stop the video and read this right here, and I'm going to show you Zechariah 6, 1 through 8 on the next screen. But the important thing to remember, and I'm going to talk about all of these as we go along, is that there's a white horse, a red horse, a black horse, and in the King James Version we see that it's a fourth horse is called the pale horse. And in Zechariah 6, 1 through 8, we see that there's red horses, black horses, white horses, and grizzled and bay horses, which mean spotted and of a strong color, is what grizzled and bay means. And we see that these four sets of horses are four spirits which are in the world. They go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth, and they go into the world. And we're going to talk about each one of those sets of horses. And the first thing I want to talk about is the pale horse in Revelation and how it's interpreted as pale. The original Greek word used is chloros, which means greenish or pale green. And that same word, that same exact Greek word, is used in three other places, in Mark 6, Revelation 8, and Revelation 9. And each of those other places, it's correctly interpreted as green. And when we go through the meaning and the prophecy of this horse, you're going to see that it really is a green horse, and it should have been interpreted as a green horse in Revelation. It's described as the grizzled and bay in Zechariah, which, like I said, is spotted and of a strong color. So we can see that there's a green horse, a black horse, a red horse, and a white horse. And likewise in Zechariah, we have the white, red, black, and grizzled and bay, spotted and of a strong green color. And in Zechariah we see that these spirits these horses represent spirits in the world. And we're given, when we combine the two scriptures, like I said, we get a much more detailed picture. There's four spirits which govern the thinking, worldview, cultural, and societal ways of life. And when we're done, you'll see at the end that if you would see what those spirits represent, you can see how that they really do govern the thinking of the people that are under that spirit, so to speak. So I'm going to start with the black horse. And the color black represents capitalism in political and news circles in the world. Black represents capitalistic thinking in countries and methodologies and ways of doing things. And in the black means you're profitable in business. It's a term to represent that you're doing well money-wise, that financially you're doing well in your business. And the black horse fits really well when you look at everything that's said about the horse in both Revelation and Zechariah. Now it says in Zechariah that the black horses go north. They go forth into the north country. And when you look at capitalistic nations, if you look at the map here, you can see that it's largely in North America and Europe where the black capitalism is represented in the world. And you've got a little bit more in the south as well, but you can see that it's the majority is in the north. And the black horse, the rider, had a pair of balances in his hand, saying, "A measure of wheat for a penny, don't hurt the oil or the wine." It's talking about trade, making money and selling things. And a lot of people don't know this, but there's a pair of balances on a U.S. dollar bill, on not just the dollar bill, but several, in fact, most of the denominations of the United States printed money. There's a pair of balances, and it's the Treasury seal. It represents justice, but U.S. currency represents global free trade and capitalism. In fact, U.S. currency is the global currency. The U.S. dollar is the money that the International Monetary Fund uses, the IMF. And that's the global currency that the world uses, the United Nations and everyone else. Now, here's a $100 bill, and if you can see, it's got a pair of balances. It's the seal of the Treasury seal. And like I said, it represents justice. The balances represent justice, but in the United States dollar is what I'm talking about for capitalism and what it represents. So you can see all the things about the black horse fit capitalism very well. In the North Country, the financial aspect of it, selling things and capitalism, free trade, it all fits very well. So now let's move on to the white horse. The white horse went forth after the black in Zechariah. Now this is a map of where Catholics live in the world. And you can see that same representation in North America and Europe as very highly Catholic, as well as South America. So it follows that the white horse followed after the black. And if you compare these two maps, you can see what I'm talking about, where it's very much where the black horse went, the white horse is following right along. Now the white horse, the rider had a bow and a crown, and it went forth to conquer. The Pope wears a crown. The Pope rides in a white limo. He wears white. He has a white helicopter. Everything about Catholicism is white, and it stands for the symbol of peace. White is the symbol of peace, and the Catholic Church brings a message of peace. That's what they present to the world, is that they are bringing about peace. Now, if the Vatican were to ride a horse, what color would it be? right? It would be a white horse. I mean, everything that he wears and rides in is white. And it says that the rider has a bow, and while the Vatican doesn't have an army, it has no standing army, the Catholicism is certainly a conquering power. Whenever a majority of the people of a nation become Catholic, the Catholic Church believes that they have the right to make political decisions for that nation. So again, the black horse very, very well represents capitalism in the world, and the white horse very well represents Catholicism in the world, both in Zechariah and the description in Revelation for both of those. So let's look at the red horse now. The red horse, communism in the world is red. I mean, that's just, we know that red is the color of communism. And one of the things that it says about this horse in Revelation is that they kill one another. They take peace from the earth. And he has a great sword. And there's no description of the red horse in Zechariah on where it goes. It's missed in that part of the prophecy, but it's just shown as a red horse. And it doesn't say where it goes. But we know that communism is largely in Russia and China. And when it talks about do they kill one another, do they take peace from the earth, it's estimated that over 80 million Chinese have been killed in political purges in China since the communists took over in 1948. And that the government of the USSR has killed at least 67 million of its own people over the years. And Russia and China are both socialist or communist nations. A lot of people like to separate that, and I know there's a lot of arguments about how socialism is not communism, but if you were to read the Communist Manifesto, you would see that it talks about socialism all through that. And it's really not anything different. You can take certain aspects of communism and point it at socialism and say that it's different if you try to do that, but it really is the same thing. Socialism and communism are really the same thing. So the red horse, do they kill one another? Definitely. They take peace from the earth. Russia and China are the biggest threats in the world right now for as far as whether or not we can all have peace or not. It's the United States that's the balancing power in that whole situation, that if it weren't for the United States, either Russia or China would have probably taken over the world in this day and age. So does he have a great sword? Definitely. So now I'm going to talk about the green horse, which is by far my favorite because it really paints a picture of what's going on in the world with Islam. And the green horses went south. Death sat on him, and hell followed him. He was given the power to kill with the sword and hunger and beasts of the world. And power was given unto them over a fourth part of the earth. And the black horses in the north quieted the spirit of the green horses in the north country where the black horses were. So the color of Islam is green. It was Muhammad's favorite color. And so Muslims try to be like Muhammad in everything they do. They emulate his behavior. They like the color that he liked, and that's why they have green. They have green lights. They have green flags. They paint the domes of their mosques green. Everything is green. They wear green because it was Muhammad's favorite color. So green fits. And the green horse went south. If you look at where Islam is predominantly in southern Asia and in Africa, it's definitely south where Islam is predominant in the world. And if you look at that same map that I showed you where capitalism is in the north, remember that the black horses quieted the spirit of the green horse in the north country where the black horses are. And if you look at this map, you can see how it really shows how where the black horse is, where capitalism is, Islam is at its lowest percentage of population, its lowest strength, and where the black horse does not exist is where Islam is the strongest. And then the green horse also had the power to kill with the sword and with hunger. And where we see that Islam is south, we also see that hunger is south, predominantly in Africa and India. And that's where all the starving people of the world are. And it's predominantly where Islam is the strongest. And then death sat on him and hell followed him. If you know anything about the history of Islam, you know that since Muhammad and ever since then, for the last 1400 years, it's always been about violence and death, and that jihad has been around since the days of Muhammad and since shortly after, when they were fighting for control, and the two factions of the Shiites and the Sunnis have been fighting over control of Islam and to establish the caliphate for the last 1400 years. It's been going on ever since then. And since Islam is not of God, we know that that Islam, they say that they worship the God of Abraham, but we know that they don't. And my video on Islam and the Bible shows you exactly why that is, and I encourage you to watch that video. I do have an old one that's out there right now that you can watch, and I'm going to be making a new one that has a lot of updated information in it very soon. So since the Islam is not of God, hell most certainly follows. So this may be referring to the second death that's mentioned in Revelation 2:20 and 21, where it means everlasting death. So that would be why death sat on him and hell followed. Now the green horse was also given power over a fourth part of the earth. Now, Islam is growing by leaps and bounds today. It grew from 1.48 billion in 2008 to 1.8 billion in 2015. And it's estimated that today, in 2018, that Islam is almost exactly 25% of the world. That they've been continuing to grow, and especially since all of the refugees in Europe are converting a lot of Europeans, a lot of them out of fear for their own lives. They're just converting, and it's what happens in Muslim countries, Arab countries that are predominantly Muslim. People that grew up in a family that's Muslim, they just identify as Muslim even if they don't believe the religion, because they know that if they don't, that their family will kill them. And in Europe today, we're seeing how this influx of Muslims is causing lots of violent problems in Europe, and that a lot of Europeans are just deciding to go with the flow, save their own life, and not try to be something else, and because it's fear for their life. So they're just doing what they have to do to survive. And so this green horse was given power over a fourth part of the earth, which matches Islam exactly today. So the four horsemen and the horses with chariots most likely represent the spirits of Catholicism, capitalism, communism, and Islam. We can see, like I said, those spirits that we're talking about have been in the world for a long time. And like I said in the beginning, if you think about it, if you think about the people that live underneath these umbrellas, or spirits, so to speak, is that their mindset is different. The way they think, the way they live their lives, their societies are completely different and governed by those spirits. So Catholicism's been around since the 4th century. Capitalism since around the 16th. Communism around the 19th century. Islam was born in the 7th century. So we can see it's about the last 1700 years that these spirits have been growing and dominating peoples. And it's not necessarily in the order that John saw the seals broken. We can pretty much assume that the seals weren't necessarily broken at far apart times, right? Where they were, this one was hundreds of years after that one. It's safe to assume that the seals were broken fairly soon after each other, and that these 4 spirits have been in the world. It's just that some of them dominated more quickly than others, and so we see them in the world predominant at different times, even though the spirits have been working in the world for a long time. And it doesn't necessarily mean that for sure, but it certainly fits. So I'm just presenting that so you can see, so you can think about it and put it all in your head. And well, why does, Catholicism was, green was the last horse, then why didn't it start earlier than the other ones, or why did it start earlier than the other ones? But when we think about it, the spirits have just been working in the world. They haven't necessarily been dominated at the same time, at the same rate, is what I'm saying. And when we look at this, the 7 seals, and we look at the 4 horsemen and the 4 spirits that are in the world, and if you've seen the 7 trumpets video, and if you've seen the Understanding Prophecy or Prophecy Explained video, where I show all the different images of the beasts from Daniel 7 and how they're combined in Revelation 13 and how it's used in Revelation 17 by the Bible's great whore, and how they all combine to make the false prophet and the Antichrist's power base in the last days. The 4 horsemen of Revelation and the spirits that are in the world that we're talking about right now fit with that image that God painted exactly in the same way. Where you can see that capitalism is represented by the European nations, Islam by the 4th beast, the 10-horned beast, which is going to be the power base of the Antichrist, the 10 kings that will give him their power, and he's going to align himself with these European nations, as well as communism, which is the bear, the Russian bear. And I'm going to talk about that in another video when we talk about modern nations in the Bible. And I do have an article on my webpage called Modern Nations in the Bible, and I welcome you to go read that, and I will be making a video on it soon as well. And then so that's represented there with Daniel 7's beasts, so the 7-headed, 10-horned beasts that we see in Revelation 13 and Revelation 17 is the combined beasts of Daniel 7. And we can see the great whore, Catholicism, riding on the back of this beast, where the false prophet aligns with the Antichrist, and they create this new world order and a one world religion, which is what the Antichrist and the false prophet are going to do. So then a quick look at the remaining seals. The 5th seal is the saints of God that are already dead are told yet to rest yet for a little season, so that God will avenge their deaths. And the 6th seal, as we've seen, is the same event as the 7th trumpet, the 7th vial, Matthew 24, which is immediately after the tribulation, and Ezekiel 38, which is the same as the Battle of Armageddon in the vials, as the Battle of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel. They're the same event. So this 6th seal is the event that matches the 7th trumpet, 7th vial, in Matthew and Ezekiel and other places in the Bible. I'm just putting these 5 scriptures together because it gives us such a good picture of how they're all the same thing. And I'm going to be doing a video series on understanding Revelation. I have an article on my website right now that you can read that goes through Revelation chapter by chapter and verse by verse. And I'm going to be going through that, doing that in a video series to help people understand how to read Revelation and how to understand it. And then the very last event is the seventh seal, where there is silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour. And this is when all the events take place. The sixth seal, seventh trumpet, seventh vial, the battle of Armageddon is done. Jesus has finished his descent, wiped out the armies coming against Israel, and then the Bible says it is done. And that's when the seventh seal is broken. And there's silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour because it's done. Wow. God's plan has reached its culmination and it's done. And he's going to begin that final day, that final 1,000-year reign, and then begin eternity with us at the end of that. Praise the Lord.